No, we don't need to delete it.
Use very intense data security policies in the city.
Recording in progress.
We can have, do you need to get into it now? I can, okay.
So, good evening. I call this meeting of the Greenbelt City Council to order, work session. My name is Emmett Jordan. I serve as the mayor. Council, will you introduce yourselves, please?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jenny Pompey, council member.
Danielle McKinney, council member.
Frankie Fritz, council member.
Amy Hazel, council member.
Silky Pope, council.
Okay. Hey, before we begin, are there any information items or discussion items for the end of the meeting? I have to leave a bit early, so I'm going to miss those, but any other information items? Not hearing anything. So we do hold these work sessions on Mondays or Wednesdays several times a month to exchange information with community stakeholders and to gather input from staff, advisory boards, and residents. No votes or formal actions are taken at our work sessions. Tonight's session is open to the public, as are all council meetings. Those executive sessions as authorized by state law. So residents can observe our deliberations, and we're going to pause periodically for comments from the public, either online or in person. If you're in person, just raise your hand. After being recognized, you can go to the podium. You'll need to state your name and provide an address. We need that for the record. If you're on Zoom, use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen to submit a written question, or once again, you can raise your virtual hand. You'll need to supply a name and an address for the record. And finally, if you're watching remotely, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can just send an email, cable TV, to questions@greenbeltmd.gov. And with remarks, please limit your remarks 3 minutes and address just the topic under consideration. We ask that you remain civil and avoid disparaging others or questioning motives. So, tonight, the work session, the topic is an important topic. It's something that we've been working on for quite some time. So, we're trying to take an important step in deciding how to organize and how to move ahead with our equity and inclusion work. So, our history as a planned community founded on principles of inclusion. It's a foundation that we build on, not a relic that we just leave behind. So it's been a few years since we took that first step. It really wasn't a first step, but we brought in Tribesi, a consulting firm, to help us put together an audit, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion audit. So council, residents shared real experiences about living and working here. And the outcome of that process was a plan with some specific recommendations. So tonight, we're following up on the budget, attempting to move ahead, not to move back in any way, but to move ahead. We're not starting from scratch. We've got a plan that exists, and council, from a policy perspective, needs to outline the path forward. So I want to thank my colleagues for bringing us to this point, and in particular, I want to thank Councilmember McKinney for the work that she's done outlining some alternatives for alternatives. So at this time, Councilmember McKinney, do you want to start off by framing the discussion, talking a little bit about the 4 alternatives, and actually talking a bit about the context that you use to kind of put together the documents that are helping us as we think through the path forward. Councilmember?
Sure, thank you. And thank you to the public that is joining us for this discussion. I think this is a critical point in our work that we've been doing around equity, inclusion, and belonging in the city. There's been some great work done by our current DEI officer, as well as members of the city. We have seen some advancements, we've seen some changes, but I think one of the things that we don't have is the through line in the documentation around what are the accomplishments that we've had. I also believe that anytime you're going through any kind of organizational change, culture building, and things like that, that takes time. So what we gathered from the Tribesi work last year was that there were some specific actions that we could take as a city to continue to advance that equity work here. And then they also laid out a pretty detailed plan around what some phases of that work could be. I believe that we have not taken the steps that we need to do to phase out that plan and activate the plan that was outlined by the Tribesi work. So I'm hoping that we can take a look at what that means. In particular, if we're thinking about what the work looks like in the next phase, we have to figure out how, who supports the work, who becomes the champion of the work moving that forward. And what is the structure that makes the most sense given the work that needs to happen? So what might have been the work in phase 1 may actually have evolved. And so we need to look at evolving the structure of what the office looks like. So the framework that I included in the packet outlines a few options for how we can support the office and the work of equity and inclusion moving forward. One thing I do want to just reinforce is that it is not just one person's responsibility. It is the responsibility of council to ensure that we are holding the city and we accountable for the work that we're saying we're doing. It is also our responsibility to make sure we're communicating what that work is. And then throughout the city, it is not just one officer's role. It is all people coming together. But in particular, you need leadership to understand how you're looking at the work from an equity and inclusion lens. And there are different ways that we can do that. So the restructuring options are lined out as a way to try to advance that work. All of them have pros and cons. All of them take into account budget constraints that everybody knows that we have within the city. We just approved the budget. We did hold the funding that was for the Office of DEI. Now we need to figure out what makes the most sense. I'm hoping that in today's discussion, we can talk collectively about what the pros and cons of those options are for this office, and then also try to identify what we are expecting to see within the next, let's say, 90 days so that we can have a clear path forward. So hopefully that frames it. In the packet, I also included some guiding kind of questions, but I also would be remiss in not allowing the city, Mr. Samarone, Mr. George, an opportunity to discuss current status and recent accomplishments before we just dive right in, because I know that there has been work that has been done. So we cannot look forward unless we are looking at what has been done so far. And if there are pieces missing, and we have not had that, we need to close the gaps that are missing. So that is another expectation that I hope we can identify here. If there are gaps of information that we don't have, that we make a plan for how we're going to get that information so that we can successfully put whomever and what this office looks like in a position where we're setting that up for success.
I appreciate that, that framing. Very well done. So I'll open it up to staff if you want to talk a little bit about where we are now and where we've come from. You know, as we talk about developing a timeline forward, I think you know, to have a clear understanding of the timeline that got us here is just as important. So it's been a while since we worked with Tri-Bessie. I guess it's been 2, 3. It's been a little while. So a plan was proposed. We had staff in place. So where are we now, and how did we get here?
Thank you, Mr. Good evening, council. Good evening, residents. There are a lot of questions there. So I'm figuring out where to start in terms of where we are now. I'll start where I took over, or when I became the city manager, and what we did from that point forward. When I arrived, we were in the final stages of the phase 1, the phase 1 study. During my tenure, within weeks of my arrival, the phase 1 was delivered. After a few months of assessing the job and identifying the gaps that fell directly under the purview of the city manager, I started enacting a series of initiatives to drive the DEI work forward. Among those initiatives was that when we developed the budget, we developed a forward-thinking DEI center pillar to guide all of the organization's work. From that work stemmed a variety of activities were executed and delivered. Among them were interpretation and language services and recreations department. That's DEI work. We procured tablets so that residents who are non-English speakers could have access to recreational services. I identify a big gap between constituent needs and service delivery within our own organization with the county and state. So I advocated for the creation of the constituent service coordinator role to close that gap. That was all within months of my arrival. Those two items that I identified early on in my tenure here were also things that were identified in both phase 1 and phase 2. So we recognized that work needed to be done. absent of the phase one and the phase two report to close those divide. So a lot of my work, a lot of my team's work has been driven by the foundational pillars that were informed by phase one and our own assessment of the work. So that's the big picture view. We needed to put the recommendations of the DEI framework into tangible goals and strategies. So that's reflected in the budget book for FY26 and FY27. And we work to execute those initiatives. Outside of that, we did have those tangible recommendations from the Tribacy group, and they were broken into, phase one was broken into two types of recommendation. The structural audit recommendations, which the structure are how we as an organization set up to address DEI work. And then there's the cultural audit work. We have executed on several of these items. I'll start, Tim, I don't know if you have the document. Do you want to, is that the document you share with me, is that something can be distributed, or do we just talk to it? Okay. Okay. If you don't mind starting that. The recommendations for phase one started with a JEDI vision. That's for both internal and external. We drafted vision statements for what does JEDI work look like within our organization. There was a series of tools that were recommended. These are all structural aspects. A 5-year JEDI plan for systemic change, which is the strategic plan that Tribacy promoted to us in for phase 3, which was part 3 of a potentially 5-part work. We had some concerns in 2026, 27, whether we could fund those initiatives. We had some budget constraints, and we decided not to fund the strategic plan development with the hopes that we could do it internally ourselves. So that's an update on the 5-year strategic plan. The review of the city code is part of the structural audit assessment. We're currently doing that work now. It's been, as I initially presented to council, it would be a 18-month process at least, and we have received our draft of the city code review, and that's the first part of the recodification, which is to review it for legal sufficiency and things that are just absolutely outdated. So we have that first draft, and I'll speak with city clerk on when we'll bring that to council. That's just to recodify our city code. And what we agreed with council several months ago, that we would complete the recodification process for legal sufficiency, and then we will discuss with council additional updates. So we're near the conclusion of that. Another item, I don't know what item this is on the list, Tim, focus on all HR functions. We understood there were systemic issues of how we were tracking several data points, employee and onboarding and processing on the structural side. Council was very supportive of us acquiring a new HRIS system. We purchased a system with ARPA funding, and we have implemented the HRS system. That allows us for better and seamless process asset management. It's an asset management tool. So the HRS system allows us to track our talent and candidates from advertisement recruitment through onboarding and while they're on the organization and managing every aspect of HR services through this one system. It also integrates with our employee navigator system, and we can manage benefits for the employees through an integrated system. Next one is focus on public-facing departmental structures. We have done a lot of work with the teams to better serve our residents. From police department, over 60% of our police department is trained and certified in crisis intervention. That's a big accomplishment. Not only do the majority of our front-facing patrol officers are able to handle individuals in crisis, but we're also doing training. So we're training other municipalities on crisis intervention work. The data collection piece has, I'll admit, we've had some challenges here. The most recent wider community input has been we do the surveys. Most of our projects that have public input, we've done better at advertising, better at getting the word out. We still struggle with engagement. So I think among our most successful project engagement activities have been around the cemetery master plan. We had a good turnout for that project. We had a good turnout for the Indian Creek master plan. So we make an intentional effort to have community engagement events for residents to provide feedback on our projects. The community questionnaire, Tim worked with Mr. Rana, I just saw in the room, on the collecting demographic information. So for the first time, in this last election, we collected demographic information on the community questionnaire. So we made some improvements on how we engage data collection. The greater piece around engaging wider community input has been around our town halls, topic-based town halls, and that is the direct result of onboarding a constituent services coordinator. Among the earliest activities were the pressing need to do Know Your Rights training for elected officials and public servants. We hosted legal clinics, and from there on, we hosted town halls on Medicare, on the cell phone service provider. Just got an email about cell phone coverage. So we expanded our capacity to meet our residents where they are on a specific topic. We hosted rental rights, tenants town hall. And so that's been a significant improvement on community engagement from prior years prior to me. Next one is leadership training for management and directors. We launched 2 training programs for leadership development. We hire a consultant to work directly with supervisors and potential supervisors. We wanted to deepen the bench on the next generation of supervisors and leaders in our organization. So we hosted a training directly for supervisors, senior management. The program was designed to include senior management. That includes all the department heads. But after the first of a training series of 4, the survey results from that first training, we heard from the supervisors and potential supervisors that they wanted to have sessions without the senior staff. So I remove senior staff, the department heads, from attending. And the reason for that was that both the trainer and participants felt that they could have more frank, open dialogue about managing up and working with colleagues. So that's one of the training. For senior staff, we partner with College Park, New Carlton, to do senior management development. So we selected several topics as a multi-city coalition and identify where we wanted to strengthen our senior leadership teams. So we hosted that in March. I believe I've shared with some of you the presentations from that training. So those are 2 leadership training programs that we launched out of my office in HR. Separately from that, we launched an internal training program to address emotional intelligence issue, having difficult conversations, and there were additional trainings that were being developed. The challenge we have with that program is that it hit some hurdles on attendance and appeal by employees. So we had a very low attendance. We tried changing that by switching to an on-demand model where the trainings will be recorded and available through Canvas. And even an online on-demand program had challenges attracting participation and attendance. The following item on the list is create a decision-making tools. With the most impact we've had on decision-making has been around budget decisions. The past 3 years have been very challenging budget cycles. Just this year, we've had another budget challenge where, despite all of the right sizing of departments and holding vacancies, we still struggle to close a deficit. The decision-making effort, when we looked at making cuts, we looked at activities that had the least impact on the service delivery model. So we made some sacrifices among the teams where teams are taking on more workload so that we did not cut service delivery. So things that we made changes to, for example, all of our we look for all those incremental cost savings opportunities, from cell phones to hotspot for police vehicles, changing vendors. One thing we switched is we consolidated a lot of procurement through Amazon because we can get a lot of great savings through Amazon. I personally do not use Amazon, but as an organization, it is the most cost-effective platform for us to use on a lot of our procurement, and allows us to do price comparison and price matching. So with the budget constraints we had, we prioritize reductions and efficiency adjustments, looking at things that do not impact service delivery model. Among those, there are other major sacrifices. One is not funding the assistant director position for Public Works, not funding the code enforcement supervisor, and holding on to vacancies as long as we can. So that's on phase one on the structural audit. The second section, I'm sorry, I'll stop there. Any questions, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I was just thinking, just so much has happened, so many things have been done, but most of them are internal. So in terms of communicating that progress, that work that's gone on to the public, the average resident here is probably not aware of the workshops, the training, just the thinking that's gone on to, not just to take us where we were suggested to be with Tri-Bessie, but instead to kind of looking at the reality of Greenbelt, looking at where we are and where we need to go, and building on that, and so that the Tri-Bessie recommendations were not a static work, but instead a dynamic piece that we internalized, that you internalized, and worked with staff to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree, but some of the results speak for themselves. For example, one of the programs we designed is the Inclusion Camp Counselors Program, and that's an award-winning program. We assign inclusion counselors to families that need someone to work with their children to have a full experience in our camps. So that service is available for folks with varying linguistic or speaking ability, cognitive abilities, and physical abilities. That's part of our DEI work. We want the children of Greenbelt to have the same full experience in our camps as all of our other children. So those programs speak for themselves. Council wanted to see some program around workforce development, and that's part of our foundational pillars on forward thinking in DEI. So we developed that Learn to Earn program, and we funded that. We funded that program for 3 years, and we're funding it for fiscal year 27. It's included in, the 27 budget. At least the training contract is included, and we've got a good strategy to secure some of the funding for the stipends. So we may not speak to that work, Mr. Mayor, but I think the work speaks for itself in some regard. You're seeing the improvement of those initiatives. There are other things that we do internally to ensure that we're pursuing grant opportunities to provide greater services throughout the city. So on our grant funding and grant seeking opportunities, I feel incredibly fortunate that we have secured so much grant dollars to advance projects that have stalled for a very long time. The projects that are upcoming this year that I'm the proudest of is the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Program, expansion. That's a program that paper covered it. It's been sitting on the shelf for over 20 years to expand the Spring Hill Lake Recreation Center. And this year, part of that $1.8 million, there's $250,000 to advance that work. We were successful in getting the county to approve reallocation of the $1.5 million for the youth center roof replacement, to reallocate that for the Spring Hill Lake Recreation. So that brings us to a 1.8 million total, and 1.8 million is still not enough to advance that program. So we did our advocacy, and this is the first time I'm gonna say this publicly, but we have tentative approval to get up to $3 million for the Spring Hill Lake expansion. That's gonna enhance programming significantly there. One of the debates that we're having with that is, I've shared this in the paper, that I believe the needs of the program, of that community, are not met with the design. However, going back to the drawing board, to redesign the space, to meet the needs of that community, we'll be waiting many more years. So I'd rather work expeditiously to get that renovation that's been on hold for 20-some years and serve that community better. For me, that is DEI work as well. So we may not be leading the narrative on those conversations, but I want you and the citizens to be reassured that we are working hard to find financial resources to better serve our community in every way that we can.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the points that you brought up earlier was with the audit and being able to capture information in the HRIS system. And we've heard from the public, and they are wondering, in order to, move ahead from where we are, we have to know where we've been. So the kinds of metrics that we've tried to capture based on what was recommended by Tri-BESI, how have we done with achieving those goals?
Well, that's the challenge of the Tri-BESI report. It's the recommendation in phase 2 was to develop. I'm gonna look at the actual recommendation. It says establish a robust data collection system to provide insights on JEDI progress, gaps, and disparities. I think in order to develop that data collection system, we need to know what we need to track. The system collection is only as good as its design, so you start with design. And we did not get to that design. I think that was part of the strategic plan proposal, was to get to design a data collection system to then measure the work, design the collection system, design activities that contribute to the output and outcomes of those activities that can be collected. So we didn't have a clear task or parameters to develop that. And this is where I've spoken with some of you that I think we need to reassess where we are. We need to take a stock of what work that we're currently doing that delivers on DEI work, because we're doing the work. We just haven't been speaking the language of DEI. We haven't developed the performance measures, key performance indicators to track that work, but work is being done.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's been 2 years, so that's one of the reasons we're having the discussion now to talk about the metrics. Also, just how we can go about helping you and helping staff working together to make some of our goals, their aspirations, realities. So one of the things that I appreciated with Councilmember McKinney's work was the emphasis on shared responsibility with the leadership team, getting buy-in from everyone. So as important as where a position is placed in the organizational structure, just as important as that is, just everybody being responsible for the work together and kind of having clear objectives and writing things into job descriptions and MBOs, so important.
So I guess I think that goes to the data piece is, excuse me, is how are we tracking the senior leadership team and who is kind of leading the effort, and I guess now moving forward, who will lead the effort around data collection. I think one of the recommendations was also improve systemic accountability by department. And so that takes some setup. It takes some, collaboration. It takes some thought. It takes some planning around that. So when we're talking about what is going to be the structure in the next phase, we need somebody to shepherd that, even if there is a collective body that is contributing. you know, if you're thinking about, you know, like in business, a RACI model, you still need to have somebody who's responsible, and you still need to have somebody who is accountable, contributing, and informing. So the question I have is, who then becomes responsible for moving that work forward? And I think that is the gap that we need to solve in this next phase. And there are clearly, to your point, lots of things happening, but we need to be able to communicate that clearly. But there are also still we've only really gone through the structural recommendations. I think a larger part of the work too is in some of the cultural audit recommendations that also came out of this as well, that will take someone to also kind of lead that effort, or at least communicate how the city is leading and doing that moving forward. And so that is the question, I think, for here today, is what is the structure that best supports that?
There's been a lot of emphasis on where the function is going to be placed within the organization. I think to some extent that's perception. You know, if there's a real commitment from the top, from city council, whether it's in this department or that department, given the size of our organization, you know, it's as important as we make it. And obviously, you know, City Manager Summerone, you are very committed to moving this forward.
I am, of course. It's been part of our pillars since I got here, and we've been delivering on those programs that we designed.
So we can talk specifically about the 4 alternatives that you've proposed. And we don't have to stick to that framework. If someone has a better idea or other ideas, we can certainly go there. Is that council's will? Shall we talk about the 4 scenarios?
Just a quick question, though. Before we get into the structures of it, I want to make sure that we are kind of setting some expectations for what we're hoping to see, to make sure that the structure supports that. So in my first recommendation, or at least question, was around, okay, what do we need to establish that has not been established? Because that then becomes the work. And so I think one of the things I'm not sure we have documented is what has been, you know, you're talking through some of these like artifacts and examples of things that we've done, and it would be great to be able to align that to the actual strategic plan. And I don't know if that document exists. And I would say, so Tribesi put together a plan, and then after that plan or recommendations, there should be some type of implementation plan. And so some of the things that you're talking about should align with what is in that implementation plan. Is there a document of some type that says this is the implementation plan? And if not, we need to get that written down and documented. And the person and how we set this up, we need to make sure we have the right person in the structure to make sure that happens.
And those are 2 documents that are missing. We don't have a strategic plan, and we don't have an implementation plan or action plan that derives from that. But I think more globally, we as an organization lack a strategic plan. So you need DEI, the DEI work should be infused in the organizational-wide strategic plan. And that's one of the things that I've been working on since I took on the job. We redefine the guiding principles for the work. So we introduced the foundational pillars and goals and objectives to that foundational pillars. So we aligned our internal work with those foundational pillars. And I have been advocating to council that we develop some organizational-wide strategic plan. And that starts at the top. So I take my foundational pillars, our foundational pillars were developed around the focus areas of council. We couldn't develop a strategic plan on our own for the organization. So that's something that we need to work on, and we've been discussing with council the need for developing a strategic plan. On our work to develop those strategic goals have been recognized by the GFOA. If you recall, one of the new recognitions by the GFOA for award were our strategic goals and objectives and our long-term financial forecasting. So we've been inching forward towards that strategic framework.
Yeah, and somehow, it's not just council and staff, it's the public as well. And it's just, there never seems to be the time to do that community-wide engagement on town hall kind of visioning that we had. We had that once, I don't know, about 10 years ago. It's been quite some time. And over the past years, we've begun to have retreats and setting two-year plans. So we're getting closer and closer. We just gotta find the time, because you can't just do a strategic plan in one afternoon.
So I think, I think what you've made is a really great point. Like, there are some high-level strategic thinking, forward-thinking movement that needs to be done, which includes how are we moving this Jedi work forward. So whomever is in, or whatever this office needs to look like, it needs to reflect the city's desire to have a more comprehensive look at how we're organizing the city moving forward. And so that role should encompass that as well. And so I think the evolution that we're seeing is that the existing role was more targeted at getting the initial study done, right? And so now we're moving to a point where the study has identified several gaps and made recommendations. And this was 2 years ago, to your point. There have been things done. But how do we align that, and how do we activate that plan? And so there needs to be an office that is led by someone who has the capabilities for sort of strategic planning, community visioning, organizational transformation, and pushing that forward with still having that Jedi lens. So the recommendations that I outlined, and that's why I sort of captured the title differently to encompass it to be more around organizational transformation and capability building. So my recommendation would be to look at a role in an office that can support that holistic approach. My concern is that looking at simply moving it into HR as a generalist position doesn't allow for that high-level organizational transformation work to happen.
And I agree, those are two very distinct functions that require different set of skills. The administration's recommendation to create the employee engagement was driven by the DEI officer making the recommendation. I understand that there were some barriers or challenges in the role that contribute to that recommendation. But I think when you're talking about transformation or structural transformation and capacity enhancement, I think it requires a level of analysis that it's hard for one individual to do and one office to do. I'm thinking of past organizational assessment work that I have done. It requires a lot of analysis, workload analysis, service delivery, and once you've done that, a strategic alignment and recommendations based on strategy that it's hard for one individual to have. I reflected on the city council has hired, I believe, at least two firms. Mayor and Councilmember Pope may remember hiring the Matrix Corporation to do the organizational assessment.
Which was actually a very valuable piece of work. It paid off.
It is. It has informed me since I've arrived, and the document is still helpful. It's from 2013, 2012, earlier, and there's some nuggets of insights and recommendations there that we didn't execute. Part of my success has been looking over these studies that we've done and learning from it and executing from it. So I think we need that level of organizational assessment, because there are things that we can do better. There are resources we can move around, and we don't have the big picture assessment to be able to make that informed changes. So we're piecemealing it, piece by piece. A good example has been our special events coordination. It used to be fragmented. So during my tenure, we created the special events coordinator role, which is Patrick Mullen. And Patrick Mullen is part of the team that's interdepartmental coordination for delivering events, so in coordinating events for the city. That has improved the way that we deliver service, reduce our resources to deliver those activities, and just deliver better quality of programming. We're going to be making additional changes to the communication. We've done some of that communication work, restructuring some the approaches to our work, but there's more to do on the communication, and thanks to council, we'll be hiring for that bilingual content specialist position, because that is a gap that we need. So we're making decisions sort of piecemeal because that's what I have. That's what I have, and we're doing the best with the resources we have.
Councilmember Fritz.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation so far. I with the caveat that, I can't speak for any specific person who would do it or any specific firm that would do it. I think that there is merit in getting, an organizational assessment done. And there's merit to people externally taking a look at our operations and kind of looking at things from a different way and, making sure, checking, are we keeping up with best practices? Because this is an incredibly dynamic field. I've been following it since around 2018. But really got more involved since 2022 in following how Montgomery County is doing this, and it's a much larger organization with much more resources. So putting all those caveats on it, that they have every department sends a racial equity tool analysis of their budget, and they have to give a written description of how every piece of their work is related to racial equity, and trying to relate that. And, every field, public safety is very different than public works, right? And there's very different theories, and sometimes there's conflicting theories on what racial equity means in a public safety environment, in a public health environment, in a public works environment. So bringing new insights is gonna always be important, and it's gonna be a constant update, because what we thought was a best practice might not be 2, 3, 4 years from now. I think that I would like to Councilmember McKinney's point. I do think someone who could, obviously they can't do every department every month. They can't do every department every quarter, but maybe they can do every department on a rotating 3-year cycle, right? And at budget, we try to see at a high level what the department's objectives are, and we try to have each department set goals for racial equity related to their work, and accessibility and other forms of inclusion. But it's important that I think that we have in-house capacity to mentor and to follow up with those folks, and maybe their plan of work that we set out as this body says you're going to do police this year, next year you're going to do public works, and the year after that we do that. It doesn't mean everyone else forgets what they were doing for 2 years and then only comes back to it in the 3rd year, but slowly I think these capacities build on each other. And I'll be candid, as we hire new people, or as people who've been here for a long time really start to look into these issues and develop a passion, we should support those people in every department who if there's someone in the police force that says, I really am interested in the literature on public safety and how it relates to racial equity, we should be encouraging that. And this should be a resource for those folks. And I understand we have trainings that folks have, but making sure that there's consistent participation, I think, needs to be a huge part of this office. So some of the work is internal facing, but I think a lot of it does not fall under a standard kind of HR role as well. So that's my view.
Councilmember Pompey?
Yeah, so part of what I did in leading up to this meeting and trying to assess, like, what do we do next with this position, one of the things I did was go back and look at weekly reports over the past few years, because every week, council and the public has access to as well. We get a weekly report that details what the rough sketch of what each department has done. And I just noticed that over time in the DEI department, there was less DEI work happening. And I'm not sure, like, I couldn't pinpoint a specific turning point for that, but initially there was a lot of, preparing for luncheons, getting ready for trainings, creating a tracking document, and there was a lot more happening. But then in the past year, it was more attended a records training, covered a council session. And I'm just concerned that of all the work, DEI work Mr. Salmeron talked about, like, where was the DEI office in there, and how are we need to do better with this position of, like, actually making sure this position is doing the DEI work, and, like, how are we gonna structure this position with specific goals, so that that work is happening, and it's happening in this office, and it's being appropriately tracked, right? This is one thing I feel like this role should be doing. It's really getting a good handle on all these different things that we're doing. And I didn't see that happening here, and that was of concern to me, and also concerning to myself, because I didn't pick up on it until we started, really discussing this. And I think probably all of us here on council should have picked up on it, that something was not happening that should have been happening. And I'm not casting aspersions or blame, but it's black and white. I mean, anyone can see it. So I think it is going to be important that this position be doing some direct reporting here to council, where we're hearing from them, at least on a quarterly basis, of, like, real in-person updates on what's going on. I think that's a better way to keep us here on this dais more accountable for the work that we should be doing. And I think, as far as the level of the grade or class, I think one thing that is important that we've talked about a few times is, DEI work is not stagnant, right? Like, it's something that's going to be changing and growing as it's happening. And I think that it is appropriate for whatever position that we decide to have, that is a position that changes and grows, and that we are ready to acknowledge that. Like, okay, well, they were doing all of these things and creating a tool and tracking documents, and all of that stuff's done, and now what are we gonna do? Like, now how are we gonna, now this person's gonna take that tool and do X, Y, Z with it. But I think we need to be ready for that too, that the role needs to evolve, because it almost seems like this role was built to get us through the Tribesi reports, but then there was no real agency or intention about, like, okay, so we've done the report, so now what? And didn't seem to be a lot going forward from that. Like, there should have been a little more built into this position to, like, how are we doing it, and what is the actual role of this person now that we're moving things forward? So I just want whatever we do for us to be just very intentional about that, so that this person knows what the expectations of them are, which is fair for anyone in any job, and that we know what the expectations are.
Those are some important points, good points. So one of the things that kind of brought us to this point, to this discussion, was the budget, and your recommendation that structurally that the office be realigned due to workload, and also just in terms of the classification, just peer-to-peer, other people in the organization that might have a broader portfolio. I think those are some of the reasons that you brought up in talking about changing this position. But what I was trying to get at is, in terms of the placement in the organization, if this function was somehow aligned with human resources, I think it'd be really, really important to limit and really strictly define on the HR side what sorts of things this person would be doing in order to free them up for the other responsibilities which are higher level. We can take some questions. We haven't done that. Okay. Mr. Park, please, if you could come over.
I'd just like to offer an observation.
Just say your name and where you're living. We don't. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Oh, the microphone's not picking up? Dr. Rosado, Mr. Rand had his hand up first, but go ahead.
We're gonna check.
We're gonna check the
Dr. Rosado,
microphone,
we're
though.
gonna check the mic before you
'Cause if
begin.
you can come over here perhaps and speak at the table if you like. Oh, there you go.
Good evening. I really appreciate the discussion that's taking place because I think for the first time you all are really looking at what was and what's not done and what is needed. However, I am going to be very clear that of the 4 options that have been presented, the only one that I personally would support is that this person is a director. No, Mayor, it doesn't belong in human resources. I know you keep pushing that, but this position does not belong in human resources. And I think that what Joe Parks just said about a strategic approach to what the role of this person should be is going to be very important in outlining the details of the position. But no, it cannot be in human relations. I looked at the research, and that's where DEI goes to die. So if that is the plan, I just need to know that now, so I can object vehemently.
Mr. Rand?
Bob Rand, 19 Ridge Road, 19 Court Ridge Road. So I remember when Tyra was hired, I was so excited. I thought, wow, this city's doing something about anti-racism and equity. And I liked what Privacy was doing. They had some, they weren't perfect, but I thought that their reports, their recommendations, phase 1, phase 2 were important. So I'm going to make a recommendation that your first data point is to get someone's story. Data is not just hard numbers, it's also qualitative narratives. I think council needs to understand Tyra's story. I don't know the story. I'm very concerned that she was so throttled and undermined that, to Ms. Pompey's point, there wasn't much coming out of the office. I think you really need to understand what happened to her. Otherwise, there's a real good chance that the next person is going to run into the same dynamics. I think there's a huge culture here that's going to resist change, that wants status quo. And I'm just really concerned that she confronted that. And yeah, I really would like to understand what's the truth and what happened here. Thank you.
I believe Mr. Orleans had his hand up first.
Thank you, Bill Orleans. I can't know what Ms. Smith would have posted on the city's website over the last couple of years because I don't know what anyone posts on the city's website. I presume that some of her communications with the city manager and council were posted. But I, as I said, don't know. One of the reasons I have found it difficult to think that this position, this role, this responsibility should be folded up within HR is that so much of HR's work is personnel related. And what's personnel related is known to the city management and to city council, but chosen by management and council not to be made known to us, the public. So if there's going to be a role that previously was performed by the city's DEI officer, and if it's going to be folded within HR, and that seems to be council's and management's intent, I would like to suggest that there should be a specific carve-out for the person fulfilling that role to be able to communicate publicly and not just privately with the city management and then to council. In the past, there have been situations where city employees had a problem, without going into any detail, and while it was first heard with, before the Employee Relations Board publicly, it was then determined that any further consideration by that board, which subsequently its decision went to management council, which won't discuss what happened. The whole process by which some people in town, management and council, thinks that it can determine on behalf of the residents what the residents may know is problematic to me. And as it relates to this role, this forthcoming new role, in some other position than distinguished from other city roles, it should be made clear that the person fulfilling that role can communicate publicly, if even only by posting on the website, which won't be available to me, but it'll be available to others, and I would be satisfied with that. Thank you.
Mr. Hartman?
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. I actually wrote something down this time, so hopefully I can be more cogent. And but anyway, I have 2 statements and 1 request. My first statement concerns the class specification or the position description of the DEI coordinator. In the current description, it states that the coordinator design, establish, and manage the Office of DEI, and that was written, as the office was being created. So, in the area of knowledge and skills, it includes issues affecting people of diverse racial, ethnic, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. In the area of ability, includes develop training material, education programs around race and equity for city employees. My problem is not with the DEI program. I think it's absolutely necessary and critical for the city. The issue that I have is that in my experience as an equal opportunity program manager for over 30 years, for the general population, the term DEI implies a much broader concept, and that more than what is described in the position description. Now, I know that traditional functions of DEI and other programs like equal employment opportunity differ in function, primary goals, and approach, among other things. But if the office is to be restructured, as this work session claims to be, I submit that it should either be renamed, perhaps IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, and expanded, or a separate EEO office should be established to cover the areas of inclusion and diversity that are not currently under the DEI flag. One way or the other, in my opinion, the city's attention should be expanded to include other underrepresented, oppressed, and marginalized people, such as women, people with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, and immigrants. And especially in the area of accessibility for people with disabilities, the needs and the and other actions that are needed are very great in this city. Despite all the improvements we've made, there's still a lot of work to do, and someone needs to be coordinated in that whole effort. So if you include, if you create such a organization for those underrepresented people, the city will show that these other populations who make up the diversity of the city are worthy of the city's attention and entitled to equity and be fully included in the programs, practices, and I'll be done in a second, of of those groups. Second.
Shall we?
Moving into, I request a few more seconds, please. Thank you. Is putting the office of DEI or the function of DEI in the HR office would create a classic conflict of interest. The policies and practices that are discriminatory, and if there's any kind of legal action, the staff in the office should not be on both sides of the issue and report to the same department head. I think that such a move would give impression to residents and businesses that the programs and functions are diminished in stature, authority, priority, planning, and implementation. And real quickly, as the last request, I would like the City Council to complete the restructuring of the city's efforts in these areas and reconsider a proposal I made way back in 2015, and that is a board or advisory committee be established for diversity, equity, and accessibility, be able to perform the same functions as other groups, other advisory committees, and help the staff in these areas. And thank you for your
Yeah,
patience.
will you email us those comments, please? Appreciate it. Councilmember Fritz, I'm sorry, I can't really see. Did you have your hand up over there?
No,
Ms.
there's a
Swope?
question on,
Oh, there's a question.
online.
Yeah, we had an email from Scott Legendre in 2M Eastway. While I can appreciate the underlying motive for hiring a contractor to oversee the program, I would like to know what the source of revenue generation is for financing the contractor.
And the answer to that question is that that's money that was set aside in the budget in the general fund. Councilman Fritz, in our last discussion during the budget, you talked about the idea of creating either an ombudsman or some sort of a committee or an advisory board, resident committee.
Well, I think definitely more formal channels, especially upon the conclusion of I know we have a lot of folks engaged in the work of the reparations committee where it's not the same, but there's overlapping interests there. So I'm sure hopefully some people might want to redirect their energy, but also continually finding ways to engage residents by a standing body, I think is good. An ombudsperson, I think, just gets to a point that's been made by multiple people, a wish for autonomy and kind of just a higher level ability to speak to the wider culture of the organization, either speak directly to council on an issue, they could be a council ombudsperson, or if there is a public-facing role, that would, I think, be a negotiated discussion, because obviously every part of the city reports to the council at some point. So their ability to, what public-facing role they would have, I think, would be an open discussion. But I think definitely addressing council in open session, I think, is important. And if they need to feel like they can talk to council in closed session, that's something we might want to consider as a body as well. But what the public-facing role is, I think that's also, I do think this is an area of public interest. DEI, obviously, we see a lot of residents coming out to a work session about it today. So that's my view, is just how do we structure a position? And I'm not saying this needs to be a decision immediately, but it might be an ongoing discussion to see how this position works, right? If the person in this position makes a recommendation to council, I need more autonomy to be able to speak about the issues, either to council or to the public at large. That's something we might want to consider.
It's a complicated issue that you brought up, just in terms of having someone report to council in an executive session on a personnel matter. In our charter and our council rules, we are, strictly forbidden from, the city manager runs the day-to-day affairs of the city, and he's responsible for personnel, and it's not council's role to be involved in personnel decisions directly.
And, I would draw a distinction there. There is personnel matters, and there's also cultural issues, right? Eventually, at what point does the personnel issue rise to the level of policy? You know, what point does it require intervention by the city? I'm not speaking to any specific situations, but, you know, culture is a very dynamic thing, and I think that that is a difficult thing. Now, ultimately, this person, I don't think, would have any power to make any decisions. The decisions would remain with council. But I don't think that this should be handling individual personnel issues. No, that would not be what I see this. That would fall under a more traditional HR role. This is a more higher level position that is letting us know, I see some issues. We are not making progress in this area, and I want to flag that for council, right?
Right. Further, with the personnel piece, if there is a specific issue that someone has in the organization, their option, what they have to do is they can appeal it to the Employee Relations Board, which is impartial. Yes, Councilmember Pompey.
I just have a resident sent comment into me who could not be here tonight and could not be online, so I would just like to read that into the record on her behalf, if that's okay.
Sure.
This is from Louise Weissman, Greenbelt resident. And her comments were, I understand council will look at next steps. Are there important outlying issues that were looked at during the course of last year's work that should be addressed? Can they be folded into next steps? DEI will hopefully have a permanent presence in the city. It is not meant to be a temporary initiative. It is of such importance that its practices should be a part of annual planning and evaluation. Hopefully, city leaders, residents, and departments, including youth, etc., would be represented and play a role in future planning and evaluation. I personally think it should be housed and supervised by the city manager, possibly with additional staff to manage it. I would hope the candidates could refer to DEI track record accomplishments they have been involved in. Future initiatives will be measured by our success stories as well as clarity on what we could do better. I have no idea what the city has in place for onboarding and HR policies, but I hope DEI will have a place in onboarding policies and practices.
Thank you, thank you. So, Councilmember McKinney, you outlined a very, very specific agenda with points that you wanted to touch on in the discussion. Structural anchors, equity index, the senior leadership capacity framework. An area that you touched on particularly was a timeline just for implementing what we need to do. So you laid that out on a quarterly, a 3-year basis. Will you kind of give a quick summary?
Sure, I would, my hope is that, and I'd echo what Councilmember Pompey had mentioned, that we need to have regular communication from whomever goes into this role. So the city manager, you do your quarterly report. It is our hope that moving forward, that there is a larger focus on what some of these things that are happening, and we can see that that is also tracked against metrics that we don't have. So I think as a starting place, we need to establish some benchmarked metrics on what we're trying to move towards. So we need to have those goals and we need to be inching towards them. And then in the reports that you do on a quarterly basis, we need to be able to see that. In addition, I do think, being able to have regular communication, whether it even just be monthly, we do get monthly reports, to be able to see what the ongoing work is. From an overarching timeline perspective, I would hope that we can have a recommendation on what let's say a job responsibilities could be for this role. I think we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about that this person in this office needs to handle data analysis. They need to be able to handle strategic visioning. They need to be able to understand the trends and the evolution in the work. They need to be able to think much more holistically about organizational and cultural change. And so I think those, unfortunately, I was not on council when the last position was designated. And so My apologies if I don't know if those were in there, but my sense is that there is an evolution from what was originally set up. And I think there's only a few of us that were probably there when it was designated. But I'm saying moving forward, I think we need to see those things, and I'd like to have, from a timeline perspective, that outlined. I also like to reiterate, I think I included in my memo, I do think setting up some type of subcommittee where we can have members of the public help to inform that work moving forward, and I think that could be a very tactical thing that we can outline very quickly. So those are, and then I think the main goal is to get our implementation plan outlined. I do know that, there are ways, I think Tri-B-C gave us a really good plan. You all are executing on that plan, but let's figure out how we can formalize it so that we can tell the story much more strategically. And we can be much more thoughtful about what goals we're trying to aim for in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line. I think that's what this role in this office should be shepherding, as well as being able to bring other leaders together to be able to figure out how they're going to activate that in their individual. So that would be my recommendation for us to see as far as clear outcomes for the next few months. But I'd love to hear from council if there's other thoughts there.
I think the 3-year timeline actually fits within the context of the original 5-year plan that Tri-B-C came up with. So we're just at that point, not quite at the halfway point, but that's where we are. So once again, you mentioned public engagement, and I had a brief conversation with Dr. Rosado just a couple of days ago, and I was asking her about what sort of metrics would be most important, most relevant. It's something that Mr. Rand has talked about quite a bit. And the reality is we have some residents that are passionate about what the city needs to track in order to document the progress that's being made. So I think is there a way that we can incorporate that feedback into our planning initially? Maybe not as a first step, but there's an email just a couple of days ago about our workforce and about contracting and whatnot. So listening to Councilmember McKinney and looking at the materials that we have here, just in terms of workload and where we are, is it realistic to look at first quarter of FY27, which would be this fall, for having these metrics in place, having sort of an outline of a plan in place?
What's the second option? If we can't make this for this next quarter.
Please.
I think that this is kind of a discussion. Depending on which direction we decide to go is what will determine what that Q1 27 metric is going to be. Right now, we can't set a metric because we haven't decided haven't discussed. Could we discuss what position we're talking about when we set this metric, perhaps? Can we start there? Like, are we talking about the director level? If we move in the director level direction, are we talking about what the deliverable would be in Q1 2027 then?
I think that we can, in fact, talk about some of the metrics and capturing some of the information that would be relevant regardless of which scenario we took. But I was trying to allude to that a little bit earlier. Do you want to specifically talk about these 4 scenarios?
I think it's important to have a direction when we're talking. So I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes.
It's council's will. Let's talk about the 4 scenarios.
Are we talking about each of the 4 scenarios, or are we talking about deliverables for the first quarter?
We're talking about the 4 scenarios
Okay.
right now.
Great, so we're going back to the 4 scenarios. Thank you. Okay, shall we start the discussion at the director level? Great. I would love to support this position at a director level. I think it's absolutely important that it be a director level because it needs to start from the top. I've done a lot of reading recently on this to try and become a little more informed. And I will echo what a lot of our residents who are already very informed have shared with us, which is that these positions historically, when they are entered into an HR department, they are not effective. Any person who we as council, since this body created this position in the first place, I think we have like a moral obligation to ensure that whoever we place in this position is being fully supported and has really, really clear expectations put on them. So that, my quarter one, I'm going to be so honest, I don't know that we're ready to hire anyone for this right now. I do not know that, I don't know how employees or staff or community is feeling after these changes. I can only imagine, based on the feedback that we've received, that it's really negative and it's really jarring. I think we need a bit of a level set before we rush into another large position. I really, really love the ideas that Councilmember McKinney has put into place, and I trust her, but I don't want to just put that out there and say, my expectations quarter one, we have someone hired, because I don't think that we would be setting that person up for success in what they're coming into. I think we really need to figure out what the previous officer, what her deliverables were, what, if anything, we can work into our workload for quarter one of 2027 in meeting some of those deliverables that she had put in, or some of those metrics that she'd put in place. And then after seeing where that goes, maybe hire a contractor to put in a next set. And then my goal would be next fiscal year, or maybe January, to have a fertilized position, a fertilized soil for this director level person to land.
Thank you. Hey, I agree with many of the points that you brought up. So just in terms of what we need to do to set up someone for success, I'm saying this because I am going to have to leave in a couple of minutes. But Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. I think we need to make sure, because I think part of the issue with the way the position was created to begin with is I believe the original idea was actually a recruitment position specifically for the police department. And then it got expanded in role. And I know we got some advice from like the city of Frederick, but they're a much bigger city than we are. And so I think, I don't think we set up the position for success, because I don't think we framed it out the way it needed to be. And I think also, as Councilmember McKinney has pointed out, I think our needs have changed. I mean, we did get the Tri-Basin audit through, but now we have maybe different needs. So I think what seems like might make the most sense is to start out with bringing in an expert to help us really decide what we need the role to be, and maybe in combination with some of that organizational assessment, doing an organizational assessment with a IDEA lens or a JEDI lens, or whichever acronym we want to use, DEIA lens, but think about using some of the time for the next 6 months to think about that organizational structure broadly speaking, as well as like what the role needs to be, and just set it up for success better. Because I think, I mean, and I will say I was on council at the time, but I didn't know anything about creating a DEI officer role. Like I think that came in when I was just barely on council and didn't know what I was doing. So, you know, I think that's part of it is, and then I guess that's my thought. So I think if we can start out with maybe a contract or position and find the right person with the right expertise to take the time to guide us in developing the position and make sure that the job description is the right one, and that we fit it into the organizational where it needs to be, whether that's at director level or maybe it's some combination of somebody at a director level role, and also we need to look at having somebody in HR who's focused on the internal facing things. It might not just be one position, it might be shifting several things, and that's also something that then we have to figure out how to find in the organizational structure and the cost structure. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. Councilman Fritzen, I gotta go.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, we've talked a lot about HR, and I also think it needs to be a director level position, or there needs to be someone who's doing the work at that level. Because there's HR elements to this, of course, but there's also just as much, we've heard PIO elements to this, right? Communicating the city's successes, right? So someone who, the ideal candidate is probably going to be a little media savvy, right? How are we communicating with our residents? Because at the end of the day, DEI, it's not just about improving internally the culture of our organization, but how those services are delivered to our residents too. The two work together, right? And we can't separate the two. So there is a huge communications role. So, it's not, and this is the challenge that we face. And I'm glad that we have residents here who are deeply engaged in this work, because they understand this is challenging. This is not easy work. A lot of it, it's not like HR, because HR, there are pretty standard, processes that have been in place for a while on how to do HR. It's much more compliance-based, and this is much more proactive, and those are two very different workflows. So, HR, there's going to be HR elements, of course, because, we are our people. Without our workforce, we don't have a city government, and we wouldn't have a city for very long either. But there's a communications role. They're clearly going to work across every single part, and I hope if this person's really a solid candidate, they hopefully will be able to help a lot of the nonprofits that we partner with and the groups that we're partnering with, and help us review how are we doing outreach to the volunteer communities that we're supporting with city funds, right? Those are live questions as well. We spend a lot of money on a cinema. Are we being inclusive in who we're bringing into that cinema? And that has a lot of benefits, because if the audience of that cinema doesn't look like the audience of Prince George's County, maybe that's part of the disconnect that we're seeing. Just Greenbelt. Only Greenbelt. I said Lois only wants Greenbelt at the cinema. All right, but no.
Recruiting.
We got to get it. Well, we won't open that can of worms today, but maybe I already did. But I'll take that back. But no, but that's my view, is that there's going to be HR components, there's going to be communications components, and we've said communications how many times today, right? I know that we want. I want to see I would love to see videos about that inclusive counselor program, right? Really advertise it out to folks, because it sounds like an incredible program.
It is.
And we should be absolutely taking credit for that, and the city should be taking credit for that, and we should be proud of that. So, and by advertising it, other cities see they're not doing as well as Greenbelt is, first of all, but hopefully they adopt similar policies, and we are in conversation with those people. So the external communications part of this is so critical as well. So. HR is there, but that's why I think having someone at the director level is important, because they're going to have to be working with every part of the government.
Councilmember Pompey.
Yeah, I agree with the assessment that it's probably a director level or equivalent position, but I do think I want to avoid the pitfalls of last time and make sure that we're just being really intentional about who we're hiring and why we're hiring them and what their job is. So I think having an expert come in here and say, okay, this is what you need this person to be doing, I think that's going to be really important. And I would just say, in the meantime, though, I think we need to figure out ways to not just let the DEI ball completely drop in the meantime. Like, we still need to be making sure that we're tracking our achievements, that we're being responsive to things that are going on internally in the culture in the organization. Like, I don't want us to be like, okay, it's on hold. Like, I don't want it to be DEI on hold. Even if we're not going to be at the level we would be if there was a full-time person here, we still need to figure out, like, how are we going to manage this in the interim? Like, what's that plan going to be? So I just want to put that, we don't have to decide that right now, but I do want to put that in folks' head, because we can't just wait 3 months or 6 months or however long it's gonna take to get a person in here and then be like, okay, now we're back on track. Like, let's try and keep the trains moving as much as we can, so that we don't, we're not starting from a deficit, as Amy said. Let's give the new person fertile soil.
Okay, so I think if there's no other council members, we've got a couple of people online, and then it looks like Mr. Parks. But I'm going to let the people online go first because they haven't said anything yet. Mr. Rosenthal, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of what I'm saying, I think I might have said 2 or 4 weeks ago at council, but I'm assuming that you would be hiring a person that had experience with DEI, just like if you hire a person to doing economic development, they'll tell you what economic development is because they know it is better than you. So that you wouldn't need a consultant to come in to design the person's job. The person, if they're associate at director level, they would tell you what their job is. And every quarter, you wouldn't be evaluating how they are doing. They'd be writing a report how the departments are doing with the program they've been trying to implement. So it just somehow, and I said it again a couple weeks ago, it just feels like the image is that this person is going to be very young and very inexperienced and needs to have a consultant come in and design their job, and then someone frequently, evaluate if they're doing their job. I mean, obviously everyone gets evaluated, but if we could think about that, this person, you'd hire someone that has done this several other cities, just like Mr. Salmaron. He's done this before. He knows what he's doing, So I didn't understand Mr. Fritz's idea about the ombudsman. It seemed like that was also someone that was evaluating the staff person. But again, I'm like everybody else. I think I'm really in favor of a director as high level and as experienced a person as you could find for the job, who would be designing their own job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Although I think there's different ways you can frame it. As Mr. Hartman pointed out, the current job description doesn't include accessibility. So, there are different ways you can write the job description and get different things out of it, potentially. Yeah, if you...
I just wanted to respond to one thing. Ms. Rosenthal, I think when we were talking about the quarterly updates, it's less about like them convincing us that they're doing their job and more about like council, like being informed about what's actually happening and that so that we actually know what we're doing. It's not about a check on them. It's kind of like a check-in for us, like making sure that we're in the loop in the way that we should be.
So Denise Nadasin says, Nadison, yeah, see, I wasn't sure where to put the stress on it. Thank you. The speakers bring up good points. Specifically, is the city ready for change? How do we measure that? What will be the goals for the DEI for the city? How will the council ensure that the officer, whoever that is, has the support and resources they need to meet the intended goals? And then a follow-up comment also from Denise. I agree, Nodison, which I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Weaver to bring in an expert to work with the city and the council to clarify what is needed to meet DEI objectives and to ensure the position is set up for success. And so it looks like, Mr. Park, you had something else you wanted to comment on.
Joe Parks, 2C Eastway. I've been working on the Community Relations Advisory Board with Mr. George, and I'm really impressed with how we are able to have the benefit of council participation in everything we're doing through Mr. George. So I was thinking, yeah, if we could get a superstar who could come in and, really make everybody's day, that'll be great. And but if we couldn't, if we have to progress a little more slowly, I would imagine that all the wisdom that is accumulated here in this council, if you had someone assigned to that office, then you would have the communication, that person would have a greater voice, there wouldn't be so many surprises, and the intention of the council and the wisdom of the council could be part of that office. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Salmaron, Mr. George, any thoughts that you want to share?
I have a lot that I'm thinking through. If I had the opportunity to redesign this, there are different approaches I would take, and they're informed by all of you. From an operations perspective, one of the challenges that I face is having to do organizational change from IT to communication all over the place. There's been a lot of growing pains that we've had since my tenure here. Look at any aspect of our work, we've had to challenge the status quo. We've had to modernize. There's a lot of things that we've seen. And I think you've seen a lot of those changes, and some there are more to come. I've tried studying, reasoning why some things have happened in the organization and what we need to make transformational change. There are several studies that we've done. One of the documents that I mentioned earlier is the organizational assessment. I encourage you to read it. There's very useful information there about structural challenges we faced over 13 years ago, 14 years ago. And there were tangible recommendations how we can make improvements there. Some of them are still relevant to this day. And I've learned from the document, made some incremental changes. The challenge I'm facing now in the next wave of changes that we need to make is this growing financial constraint. We have a lot of services that we deliver currently, and we struggle to finance them all, cover them all. If I had a magic wand or magic wand and I had all the money that I could have, not only would I have a director of people and culture, whereas we're looking at HR not from a compliance perspective, but from a coaching methodology, where we're meeting our employees where they are and taking them to where we need to go. And that includes work of coaching, training, developing new technologies and methodologies for delivering our work. And we have a very creative staff, and we're doing a lot with what we have. But there's a lot just on the HR. There's HR, people, and culture. On the technology side, we need to bring all of our assets and our people to 21st century. Let's just start with 21st century technology and approaches to work. Just in my time, we've implemented SharePoint, a lot of other technology, but we have a lot more to go. Right now, if somebody has a complaint, a resident complaint, it's a phone or an email. I want it to be app-based. I want it to be more automation, that we can get to things in real time. That's just another example. There's performance-based measures. One of the things you'll see in that matrix consulting report is the need for developing a performance management function, where we understand what the work is, what's the performance, how we measure it, and how we aligning resources to meet the demands of the work and the needs of our residents. So we need a whole performance management function. The Governor Moore just launched an Office of Performance Management. That's how dated the state is. DC government has had an Office of Performance Management for decades. And it started with a zero-based budgeting approach under Fenty's times. Everybody start from scratch. You had to justify every dollar, and every dollar need to be assigned with a performance measure. That's how performance management works. You have to justify every dollar. So look at the matrix report, that is listed as a recommendation, establishing performance management office and somebody who's responsible for that aspect of the work. That's just big functions that are currently missing. Once you get into the weeds of what we're doing and what we have lack of staffing is, we have made some decisions internally in the effort to have a balanced budget. We're not funding some positions, right? We're not funding the assistant director position for public works, code enforcement. We could use 2 more CIT personnel. One that liaisons between the police department and CARES, and one that's specifically at CARES doing the case management, the follow-up coordinating services. We could use more counselors. I could go on and tell you, list several other positions we need. The thing that I struggle with is, how do I balance the budget? That was one of the challenges we had this year. I've seen how other municipalities approach their budget cycle. Recently, a peer of ours, a neighbor, just put all the deficit in front of council and said, here, there's a $20 million deficit. How are you going to fund it? 20 million. How much I said? Yes, 20.
Probably felt like
Yeah.
20 billion to them, but yeah, only 20 million.
20 million. That was a $20 million deficit, and just put it right before council and said,
There you go.
this is what we need. How are you going to fund that? I've taken a different approach. I deliver council a balanced budget. So I look forward to next year's budget cycle because I want you in on the conversation earlier. Because we have a demand for a lot of services and I want to deliver all the services. How do we do that together? So that's my magic wand. I don't need 20 million. I don't need 20 million, but I need a lot more than what we have to deliver the high quality service across the entire organization.
Yeah, and that's an equity issue all by itself.
Access.
That's an equity issue because our main income is taxes. And that's a problem. So we're not funding many positions that are needed in order for these departments to function properly or the way they should or better, right? And so the equality comes in, right? Are we going to hire a director for $150,000 here but we're not filling other positions that are really needed? That's a question, right? Well, the work was paid. This was an ARPA position, right? And that's why we're in this dilemma.
This was never ARPA.
But we had a little bit more funding to play with during the ARPA times. When we received the ARPA fundings for other things, we were able to spend more money on positions like that, right? So now we don't have that. Now we need to reach in our pockets and say, okay, now we can't afford this, we can't afford that, and that's a problem. But equality throughout the departments and the hirings that we're doing, I mean, that falls into this same discussion that we're having. And I'm not saying we should get rid of it. I'm not saying that. I don't think it should be a director position. I know that Mr. Salmoran is in a very difficult position because he did deliver a balanced budget. So, but now we're here. So there are very nice, good suggestions. I think that we need a consultant to advise us on where we should go, where we have to go, what should we do, what do we need to do, where do we need to start before we even start to think about, who do we hire, what level should that new hire be. So I think that's a smart decision. That's a smart move. So, and I hope we can go that way. And I know that for you, it's, because you gave us a balanced budget, and then we started to say, well, we starting to tear it apart and say, well, we want to give here, and we want to give here, and of course we want to give. Of course we want to fund everybody and everything, and yeah, that's all on the wish list. But I think for this year, we're just going to have to be cautious. And even for the next few years to come, I think the budgets, I don't think in the next 2 years is going to look any better than it looked this year, quite honestly. So I just want to caution everybody.
And we do have scheduled on June 10th, part of that work session is to discuss the budget process. And so we can actually, I would like to see us start out and actually put some things on the calendar in terms of when you'd like to have preliminary conversations, any other changes to the budget process you would like to see. And also my colleagues, I think at least it seems to me like we've been making some continual improvements since I've been on council, but I'm a believer that you can always make more improvements. So that is scheduled for June 10th if folks have other thoughts about how we can improve that process. Although I do appreciate not having a $20 million deficit plopped on our laps that we had to deal with. So thank you for that. Councilmember Fritz.
Yes, we won't name the city that experienced
can
that,
probably
but you
figure
can
it out.
figure it out.
Well advertised.
Yeah, I want to thank the city manager for putting the fiscal constraints like front and center as well, because the job of government, including local government, is getting more complicated, right? CIT crisis teams were not a regular feature of government. The last time we were having these kinds of crises in the 70s when there was massive inflation and it put a lot of pressure on local governments. And then they did reevaluate, and Richard Nixon proposed revenue sharing and said local governments will get some of the federal income tax revenue. And that was repealed in the 80s, right? So these changes come and go, and we pretty loudly supported, along with MML, the Maryland Municipal League, a revenue modernization legislation in Annapolis, which will study, will study how we actually allow local governments to fund their get the resources for what we need. And on that note, I would just say there was a very good report out of the University of Michigan on tax base fragmentation. And it talks about how we are part of the Washington metropolitan area, and our residents contribute a lot, and they work very hard, and then they come back to Greenbelt. And we have these arbitrary lines that we just grew a little bit, but we didn't grow them. We didn't get much revenue out of the moving lines. We got $0 for moving the city lines. But the way those lines are drawn impact our tax base. And if you look at the entire Washington metropolitan region, which we contribute a lot to via our residents who are very highly educated, they work in the federal government, they work in every sector, but we are not a proportionate share of the tax base of our region. And you can actually look at every metropolitan area. They did a study and they broke it down so you can see it geographically. If my computer was working, I would show people, but my computer's not currently working, speaking of IT problems. So that's my IT problem, not his IT problem. But we get 1/4. We have 1/4 of the tax base per capita of Washington, D.C. So when it talks about who's able to fund, now our residents don't have fewer needs than people in Washington, D.C. We still have needs in this community that are unmet. So when we talk about tax revenue modernization, we need to look at the fact that there are some people in this country that are about to become trillionaires off of the AI boom. And we can't get, all of our code enforcement positions filled, right? Because our tax system only taxes our residents, even though our residents are working all over this region, right? So that's just an important thing when we're talking about equity. Part of the equity is the fact that Prince George's County houses are valued less than they would be in Montgomery County or in parts of the District of Columbia. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, is that there's structural factors that we have to address beyond our city limits too.
Just point of order, we're really running
Yeah,
over time
yeah,
here.
so
We're
I
sort of
think-
going off topic as well, so if we could
Yeah,
come
I
back
think-
to wrap up the DEI restructuring, I think that would be
Well,
great.
and it sounds to me like we have, I think, some general agreement that we don't want to rush into anything. We want to make sure we set up the position for success, so that looks like maybe finding the right expert to come in and help us structure the position. I also heard some fairly strong interest in making sure that that as part of that, we have regular report backs, including while we're going through this process, so that we don't lose track of it, so that we keep moving forward. It also sounded like there was some support to look at what a resident advisory committee should look like to support this work as well. Those were kind of the three. What else am I missing that sort of?
The one thing that was missing was making sure that we have all of the past data and documentation of what has happened since the Tribesi study, whether it be an implementation report, because I think that is part of our gap that we didn't follow up on, so that can inform whomever, if we are moving forward with a consultant person, they're still going to want to know what has happened, and we, as Mr. Rand said, hear the story. So I think it's important for us to get the story and get the information to be able to set even if it's an interim consultant position, to help to set that up for success as well. So I would ask that we have that documentation.
That sounds like 4 sort of follow-up items, or 4 follow-up items / sort of decision points. Not that we're making decisions in a work session, but seem to be general agreement on those. Yeah.
I will get with Tim tomorrow in the coming days to go over those 4 items and provide an initial feedback on what's possible and any deliverables associated with those 4 requests.
Yeah. And then it looks like we've got 2 more public comments, and then we do want to go over quickly the agenda for next week. So I think Mr. Orleans has his hand up first, and then Dr. Rosado. And then we'll take a look at next week quickly.
Thank you. Well, I don't personally think funding the position of someone observing Greenbelt's diversity, equity, and inclusion in its personnel cost item. I see it as a separate question, but it is a cost item. The city manager outlined other elements of our city personnel which are not being funded or only half funded, respectively to be funded hopefully in the future. Those are all cost items. The residents of the city of Greenbelt enjoy great benefits, services from the city. We could be enjoying greater benefits and services from the city. There's a lot that management and council might like to do or see done, as well as residents see done. Those are all cost items. When is council, and we've heard a bite of agreement from one or more of them recently, but when is council going to schedule a discussion as to how we appropriately or inappropriately tax our commercial base? If we taxed it more so, we'd have more funds that we internally could direct to providing services and funding very important offices like the DEI officer.
And I believe we've already responded to that, that will be part of the discussion for the next budget cycle.
When?
We don't have to pass, we just passed one budget, Mr. Orleans. Give us some time. We just passed the last one.
Just a few days ago. Last Monday.
We'll get to it. It's for the next budget cycle.
Within 1 year.
Yes.
What I have to say is I appreciate where you all are coming from, and I appreciate the comments made by Mr. Salmarone, and I understand your position. I don't know why DEI was targeted, though, and if you're going to get with Tim to do those points, I think Tyra Smith should be included in your discussion to provide you some insights that you may not be aware of. So I think that it's not just you and Tim. I think you, Tim, and Ms. Smith should speak together, because she may be able to provide you with some additional insights. But I understand where you're coming from. Did somebody leave this?
Okay, so we have the draft agenda for next week. We've got a contract addendum for the Ramada Trail design. I think that's a follow-up from the item we approved before. Public hearing for the charter amendment related to collective bargaining. Then the actual discussion of the charter amendment for second reading and adoption. We've got some updates on the program open space funding.
I didn't see
I'm looking at the one that's online.
Okay.
I'm looking at the one that's online as well.
Yeah, there may be some, yeah.
May I weigh in, Mayor Pro Tem Weaver?
Yeah.
Just to give some background on the WMATA. So the WMATA Trail, this is for a separate portion of the work. We've, council had previously approved $150,000 for Dewberry for the bridge work. This the contract that's going to be listed on the next agenda is for additional engineering along the path, so work outside of the bridge work. So that's estimated to be around $92,000. If you're shocked by the numbers, so am I. The WMATA Trail
It's
is
very expensive.
The WMATA. Oh, well, just how the numbers are tallying up.
Like
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
thing seems to, be
Yeah,
more
but
and more.
the total project cost is expected to be around $4 million
Yeah, it's
for
expensive.
3/4 of a mile trail. I share with Mayor Pro Tem Weaver, we can resurface 4 miles for that same amount of money.
Yeah, and it's a quarter mile long. But it does go over wetland and it has some other considerations, but still, it is a very expensive trail. We've got the charter amendment things, then an update on the program open space, the Indian Creek Master Plan, and then also related to collective bargaining, the city code amendment to the labor code related to collective bargaining. So that's what's on the agenda for Monday.
And we'll have that code from our attorney prior to the meeting, correct?
Yes, I have sent over the revisions that you sent over. and I've sent that to them to compile it in the red line document that they had previously provided.
When do we anticipate getting that? Did you give them a date by which to deliver that to us?
Well, they know the meeting's on Monday, so I will be part of the packet. I'll follow up with them tomorrow. I have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to review the
Okay,
changes.
it would be great if we could just have that in advance, though, if we could have that like by Friday, so that council has time to
I'll make sure that it's
read
included in the
it
packet.
and, okay.
Because the changes that are being proposed now are minimal to the previous version.
Right, but they're also gonna be suggesting language about the confidential employees, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay, I mean, I know it's still minimal changes, but I just want to make sure, I'm just trying to ensure that we get everything that we are asking for them in this document when it's delivered to us so that we're prepared to have the full conversation.
Yes, and the discussion item for Monday is a discussion item, so you would have an opportunity to inform the language to be brought forward at a future agenda meeting.
Okay, and it would be great if we could have like red line changes and also non-red line changes, just because some people have difficulty reading, you know.
And that's our practice, to provide
Great.
both a red line version and a clean version.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate you meeting with them and diligently following up to ensure that we have what we have requested for the meeting.
I want to go quickly over the meeting
Sorry.
schedule, and then I do see that there's a
And then
couple things.
I wanted to see, I was thinking there's two things that I wanted to add, but I'm worried that this meeting is going to be long. But the two things that I wanted to add were a discussion about assigning a council liaison to the theater, and then the other thing that I wanted to discuss was creating a working group of council, a finance working group of council, so that we can, as Mr. Salmer and I have discussed this, you know, talking about the budget should be something that we're doing all year long. It shouldn't be something that we reserve to budget time. And the council, the whole body needs to be discussing these things prior to November, when Mr. Salmer is sitting down working on the budget, so that we can inform him what we're looking for. So I would envision this subcommittee to meet a couple times a month with Mr. Salmeron, with pretty dedicated agendas, like talking about different, you know, revenue generation, tax rates, annexations, like different things that we would then bring to the council of the whole for us to discuss, like in a work session. So that way, as you're preparing the budget, you're sort of, you know where we are as well. Like, you don't have to try and guess what we're going to want to see and what we don't want to see. And then we're helping you too, right? Because like you said, you're responsible for balancing this budget, but it's our job too.
So that's.
Anyway, if we don't have it at this next meeting, I think putting it on the next agenda would be okay.
Well, and I think specifically because we have on the 10th a session to talk about the budget process.
Maybe we talk about it
So I
then.
think if we talk about it a little bit on the 10th, and then maybe look at having it, any creation of it after that point.
Yeah, so one of the things I was going to propose, I'm planning on proposing at that meeting, is having a formal meeting that, like we do with council every year, whether council, come November, December, I gauge where council is around priorities. And the number one thing I check on is, are you amenable to a tax rate increase? That happens every November and December. All three budget cycles I've been here has been absolutely no. So that to me is an indication that I have to work with the existing revenue that we have.
Right, which is why
Yeah.
I'm thinking, let's do a little bit of thinking beforehand, because the city that shall not be named, I know one of the things that they're doing going forward is working groups to talk about, to regularly look at the budget and think, like, and look at ways that they can, you know, economize. Like, they're gonna do that. They're gonna do that all year long now, you know, regularly, or so they say, or so they plan and hope, leading up to the budget, so that there's not a $20 million deficit dropped in their lap, right? Like, so they're more involved in that process, which I think is as it should be. So this is our fiduciary responsibility as members of the council, is our highest responsibility to my mind, so.
Yeah, and as it is now, we provide quarterly financial reports, and council accepts those. So we could expand the conversation around the quarterly financial reports. Council also gets the annual audit, and you hear that directly from the auditor. And that's an opportunity. You get two types of conversations with the auditor. We have our own administrative meeting where I take the meetings with the auditor as an opportunity to learn. I ask the auditors, how we performing, what areas of improvement, you see things that don't make it in the management letter because, and we have a retired auditor here in the audience. One of the things that in the audit letter, you'll get significant compliance issues, but they are feedback that we get administratively that do not make it onto a management letter because it's not a deficiency. But I use the opportunity to learn what can we do better, what are you seeing other entities do that we could learn from and improve our performance and our record keeping. Those are things that won't make it to a management letter, but they're part of our discussion, and we get an opportunity to ask questions about things that are related to auditing, but they're not deficiencies.
Okay, so other things, just looking at the schedule, we've got Wednesday, we've got the Board of Elections update. So they're going to give us updates on the last election, the November election. It's a bit delayed for unavoidable reasons. We already talked about the regular meeting, master plan and budget process discussion on the 10th. Then we're out for the week of the Maryland Municipal League. And then you can see the regular meeting. We do have the meet and greet at Shrom Hills Park, and I noticed that Councilmember Fritz noted the food on your handwritten one. You commented on the it's Kona ice snow cones, so that seemed Kona ice on at Shrom Hills at the meet and greet. And then meeting with
Shaved ice.
Yeah.
Ice cream. It's not ice cream. It's not ice cream.
It's not ice cream. It's shaved.
It's not ice cream. I said snow cones.
Snow cones, but anyway.
Equivalent to it.
I just noticed that you had written it down, and I thought that's worth noting that there will be frozen stuff to eat.
Wall supplies that. How many do we have?
We've purchased 75. We pre-purchased 75. It's $375, and it comes out of the special programs out of council.
Yeah.
Out of his salary.
We'll take donations, though.
Yeah. And then we've got a meeting just to round out June. We've got a meeting with County Council Member Tim Adams on the 29th, and then a follow-up closed session. Now, the mayor had talked about maybe wanting to move the closed session. He was concerned about it needing longer than the time after with Councilmember Adams and wanting to move that to the 1st, but that may be something that we can talk about on Wednesday. After the meeting on Wednesday. I'm not totally sure what he thinks will take that long, but yeah.
I understand that there's an extended discussion about personnel matters.
I'm not sure what he wants to talk about, but that gets us through June. So I think, and it gets us to 9:30. So Mr. Hartman had a quick comment he wanted to make.
While Mr. Hartman's making his way up, I will be taking vacation during the council recess in July and August.
That's what it's there for.
I didn't see the beginning of the agenda for next week, but I don't know if the proclamations are
were there
are
proclamations
listed.
on there yet?
I don't think so. But
I don't think the proclamations are on there yet.
so there are several.
Yes, I believe that, the mayor said in agenda planning today, one of them will be for Pride Month. It's just not on the agenda listed yet.
There's also other events that are having Caribbean heritage and men's health and stuff like that. So
I am not sure what other ones he's thinking about, but the Pride Month one did come up in our agenda discussion this afternoon. And we do also, just a reminder to everybody, Greenbelt Day weekend this weekend. Lots of events going on, jazz festival, events are on the city calendar.
One more thing before we close out, council's and the council's new standing rules, you have adopted a process to do in special recognitions for awareness months and other activities. I am being mindful of how much time these things add to the regular meeting. I would encourage council to visit a list of recognition months, like Hispanic Heritage, Black History Month, and that way council as a body could vote in resolutions recognizing these events, and you can read them by title, and you can do several of them and minimize the time to recognize them. So you can do them by resolution, read them by title, and then we'll design a nice official template and just publish them.
That might be a good idea, because sometimes they take a lot of time.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got Pride flag raising on Friday at 3 p.m. Chesapeake Bay celebration with kayaking at 10 a.m. on Saturday the 6th. Greenbelt Jazz Festival 1 to 7. Not for seniors only, for caregivers 1 to 2:30 on Saturday. Artful afternoon, Greenbelt Museum tour, Greenbelt concert band, and a city council history presentation all happening on Sunday. Yes. Okay. Last call.
Also Bed Bug Awareness Week.
Okay. Good night, everybody.